I didn't plan on staying over at Trent's place that night. It just happened the way these things usually do, casually, without a big decision behind it. We'd been friends for almost a year, the kind of friendship that built itself on late-night conversations, shared playlists, and an unspoken understanding that neither of us really fit into the spaces we were supposed to. It started with something simple. "Just stay," Trent said, tossing me a spare hoodie like it wasn't a big deal. "It's late anyway." I hesitated for maybe half a second. "Yeah," I replied. "Okay." That's how I ended up there barefoot in his apartment, standing in a space that felt way too personal for someone who was supposed to be just a friend. Trent lived alone, top floor, corner unit. The kind of place that always felt quiet, even when it shouldn't. There was something about the way he kept it clean, but not sterile. Lived in, but controlled. Safe. We stayed up longer than we planned. Sitting on the floor, backs against his couch, talking about nothing important. Music playing low in the background. The kind of night where time slips without asking. At some point, the conversation slowed. Not awkward, just heavier. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Trent asked, staring at the ceiling. I glanced at him. "Different how?" "I don't know," he shrugged. "Like, if we made different choices earlier. Said different things." I let out a quiet breath. "All the time." He nodded, like that answer mattered more than I realized. There was a pause. Then he said, softer, "Yeah, me too." Something shifted after that. Not obvious. Not something you could point to and say, "There, that's where it changed." But I felt it. The air got heavier. Quieter. More real. Eventually, he stood up, stretching. "You can take the bed," he said. "I'll crash on the couch." I frowned. "Dude, it's your apartment. And you're my guest. I'm not taking your bed." He smirked. "You always this stubborn?" "Only when I'm right." He shook his head, laughing under his breath. "Fine. We'll figure it out." We didn't figure it out. We just ended up in the same room anyway. Not in a weird way. Not intentional. Just one of those things where neither of us really argued hard enough to change it. I took one side. He took the other. Space between us. Safe distance. At least, that's what I told myself. The lights went off. The room settled into darkness, broken only by the faint glow from the street outside. I could hear him shifting slightly beside me, adjusting, getting comfortable. For a while, neither of us spoke. I stared at the ceiling, fully awake. Thinking too much. That had always been my problem. "Gabriel." Trent's voice cut through the quiet. "Yeah." A pause. Then, quieter. "You awake?" I let out a soft breath. "Yeah." Another pause. Longer this time. Like he was deciding something. "Can I ask you something?" he said. My chest tightened slightly, even though I didn't know why. "Sure." Silence again. Then, "Do you ever feel like you're pretending?" The question landed harder than it should have. I turned my head slightly, even though I could barely see him. "Pretending what?" "Everything," he said. I didn't answer right away, because I knew exactly what he meant. And I also knew that answering honestly would change something. "I don't know," I said finally, quieter than before. "Sometimes." He exhaled softly. "Yeah," he murmured. "Same." The room felt smaller, like the walls had moved in just a little. "Trent," I started, not even sure what I was going to say. But he spoke first. "Do you ever think," he said slowly, "that maybe we're just scared to be honest about certain things?" My pulse picked up. This wasn't random anymore. This wasn't just late night talking. This was something else. "I think people avoid things that might change their lives," I said carefully. He let out a quiet, almost amused breath. That's one way to put it. Another silence. But this one wasn't empty. It was full of everything we weren't saying. Then, "I almost told you something a few weeks ago," Trent said. My stomach dropped slightly. "What stopped you?" "You did," he replied. I frowned. "Me?" "Yeah," he said. "You were talking about someone you liked." I figured it wasn't the right moment. I went still. "I didn't say I liked him," I said. "You didn't have to." The way he said it calm, certain made my chest tighten. "That wasn't," I started, then stopped. Because I didn't even know what I was trying to argue. Trent shifted slightly beside me. Not closer, but not further either. "Forget it," he said quietly. "It's not important." "It is," I said before I could stop myself. That surprised both of us. I felt it in the silence that followed. "Then ask me," he said. My heart was beating way too fast now. "What were you going to tell me?" He didn't answer immediately. And somehow, that made it worse. Because I could feel it coming. Whatever it was. It mattered. A lot. When he finally spoke, His voice was different. Lower. More careful. I was going to tell you that. He paused, exhaling slowly. Things feel different when I'm around you. Everything in me went still. That's it? I asked, trying to sound normal. He let out a quiet breath. No. Another pause. Then, but I didn't know if you'd want to hear the rest. My throat felt dry. I'm hearing it now, I said. The words came out softer than I intended. More honest. Trent turned his head slightly. I could feel it, even if I couldn't fully see it. Yeah, he murmured. You are. Silence stretched between us again. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was waiting for something neither of us could take back. And then he said it. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just real. I think about you more than I should. That was it. That was the moment everything changed. And I knew. Nothing about this night was going to stay simple anymore. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew that whatever I said next would lock us into something we couldn't undo. The room felt different now. Smaller. Warmer. More honest than it had any right to be at this hour. I think about you more than I should. His words kept replaying in my head, like my brain was trying to slow them down, analyze them, find a safer meaning. There wasn't one. Gabriel. Trent said quietly. I'm here, I replied. But I didn't sound like myself. I sounded like someone standing on the edge of something he wasn't sure he was ready for. You don't have to say anything, he added quickly. I didn't want to keep pretending like it's nothing. That word again. Pretending. I let out a slow breath. I'm not pretending, I said. He went still beside me. Then what are you doing? He asked. That question hit deeper than anything else. Because I didn't have a clean answer. I think I've been avoiding it, I admitted. Avoiding what? I turned my head slightly, finally letting myself look at him. The darkness made it easier, like I could be honest without fully being seen. This, I said. Silence. Not empty. Focused. Yeah, he murmured. That makes two of us. My chest felt tight. Not in a bad way. Just full. Like something I'd been holding down for a long time was finally pushing back. You said I stopped you, I said. A few weeks ago. Yeah. What were you going to say back then? He let out a quiet breath, almost like he'd been expecting that question. The same thing, he admitted. Just less clearly. I huffed a small, nervous laugh. You think that was clear? For me, yeah. I shook my head slightly. You really just dropped that and expected me to be fine? I didn't expect anything, he said. That's kind of the problem. There was something honest in that. Unfiltered. And it made it harder to hide behind anything. Trent, I said slowly, why now? Another pause. Then, because I didn't want to wake up one day and realize I missed my chance to be honest with you. That landed hard. Too hard. I swallowed, my thoughts starting to move faster than I could keep up with. You're assuming there was a chance, I said quietly. I'm hoping there is, he replied. No hesitation. No backtracking. Just real. My heart was beating in my throat now. Gabriel, he added, softer. If I'm wrong, just tell me. I'll deal with it. I just needed you to know where I'm at. That should have made it easier. It didn't. Because now the choice was on me. And I hated how much it mattered. I don't think you're wrong, I said. The words came out before I could filter them. Trent didn't move. Didn't speak. But I felt the shift. Then what are you thinking? He asked quietly. I let out a breath, dragging a hand over my face. I think. I paused, searching for something honest enough. I think I've been trying not to see it. Why? Because it would change everything. Because I didn't know if we could go back. Because losing him would be worse than never trying. I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said, because this matters. He was quiet for a second. Then, it matters to me too. Simple. But it hit harder than anything else. I turned onto my side slightly, facing him more directly now. There was still space between us. But it didn't feel like distance anymore. It felt like hesitation. Say it clearly, I said. My voice was steady, even if everything inside me wasn't. What? He asked. What you mean? I said. No vague versions. A long pause followed. And then, I like you, Trent said. Not rushed. Not unsure. I've liked you for a while, he continued. I just didn't know what to do with it without messing everything up. There it was. Out in the open. No taking it back now. My chest tightened, but not from panic. From recognition. I figured, I admitted. That surprised him. You did? Yeah, I said quietly. I just didn't let myself go there. Why not? I hesitated. Then told the truth. Because I didn't know if you'd meet me there. That shifted something. I could feel it. Gabriel, he said, softer now. I'm here. The way he said it, it wasn't just about the moment. It was about everything we hadn't said before, everything we'd avoided. I closed my eyes briefly, letting that sink in. Then I opened them again. You're making this really hard to ignore, I said. He let out a quiet breath, almost like a laugh. That's kind of the point. Another silence. But this one wasn't tense. It was settling, like we'd crossed something and were just now realizing where we'd landed. Can I ask you something? He said. You already did, I replied. Yeah, but this one matters more. I frowned slightly. Okay, there was a small shift in the bed. Subtle, but closer. Not enough to touch, just enough to feel it. When you stayed tonight, he said, did you already know? My heart skipped. I thought about it. About the way I hadn't really hesitated. About how comfortable it felt being there. About how aware I'd been of him all night. Maybe, I admitted. He exhaled slowly. Yeah, he said. That makes sense. Why? Because I felt it too. That word again. Felt. And suddenly, everything clicked into place in a way that was impossible to ignore now. This wasn't one-sided. Hadn't been for a while. We'd both just been pretending not to see it. I don't know what happens next, I said quietly. Me neither, he replied. That should have made it worse. But it didn't. Because for the first time, it felt like we were both standing in the same place. Not guessing. Not assuming. Just there. And then, can I be honest about one more thing? Trent asked. I let out a small breath. At this point, I think you have to be. He shifted slightly again. Closer. Enough that I could feel the warmth of him now. Yeah, he said quietly. I probably do. A pause. Then, I didn't want you to leave tonight. My chest tightened. That's why I asked you to stay. There it was. Not casual. Not random. Intentional. And suddenly, everything about this night made sense in a way that made it impossible to go back to before. I swallowed. You could have just said that, I murmured. He let out a quiet breath. I'm saying it now. And somehow, that mattered more. I don't think I slept at all. Even though at some point the conversation faded. Even though the room went quiet again, my mind refused to settle. Every word Trent said kept replaying, but not in a chaotic way, more like something I was trying to fully understand now that it was finally out in the open. I didn't want you to leave tonight. That line stayed with me the most, because it meant this wasn't just something that slipped out in the dark. He chose this, and now so did I. When morning came, it wasn't dramatic. No sudden realization, no awkward distance. Just soft light coming through the window and the quiet awareness that things were different. Not broken, not weird, just changed. I shifted slightly, turning my head. Trent was already awake. Of course he was. He always woke up earlier than me. But this time, he wasn't pretending to be asleep. He was just looking at me. Not intense. Not overwhelming. Just present. Morning, he said quietly. Morning, I replied, my voice still a little rough. There was a pause. Then he added, you stayed. I frowned slightly. You say that like it was optional. He gave a small, almost careful smile. It kind of was. I held his gaze for a second longer than usual. Yeah, I said. I guess it was. Silence settled between us again. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like both of us were waiting to see who would define what this was now. What are we doing? I asked finally. Straight to it. No soft version. Trent didn't look away. I think we're figuring it out, he said. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I've got right now. I exhaled slowly, pushing myself up slightly, so I was sitting against the headboard. Last night wasn't nothing, I said. I know. So we don't get to act like it was. I'm not planning to, he replied. That helped. More than I expected. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to organize thoughts that didn't want to be organized. Okay, I said. Then let's not overcomplicate it either. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Meaning? Meaning. I hesitated, then said it anyway. We don't need to define everything right now. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, he said. I can do that. Another pause, but lighter this time. Like we'd agreed on something without needing to spell it out completely. What about you? He asked. What about me? You good with this? He said. Honestly, that question mattered. Because this wasn't just about him being honest anymore. It was about me too. I thought about it. About the way I felt right now, not panicked, not overwhelmed, just aware. Aware that something real had started, and that I didn't want to run from it. Yeah, I said quietly. I am. His shoulders relaxed slightly, like he'd been holding that tension without realizing it. Good, he murmured. We didn't move closer. Didn't make it something physical. But the space between us didn't feel like distance anymore. It felt like potential. The rest of the morning was strangely normal. Coffee in the kitchen, music playing low, Trent leaning against the counter like he always did. Except now, everything felt slightly sharper, more intentional, like we were both hyper-aware of each other in a way we hadn't allowed before. At one point, our hands brushed while reaching for the same mug. We both paused, not pulling away immediately, not turning it into something bigger either. Just noticing. That was new. "You always steal my mug," he said. I smirked slightly. "It's not your mug. It's been in my apartment for a year. That doesn't make it yours." He shook his head, but there was a small smile there. And something else. Something softer. We let it go. Didn't push it further. And weirdly, that made it feel more real than if we had. Later that afternoon, we ended up back on the couch. Same spot as the night before. But everything felt different now. Not because something huge had happened, but because something honest had. "You're quieter than usual," Trent said. "I'm thinking. Dangerous." I rolled my eyes slightly. "Shut up." He smirked. Then, after a second, his expression softened. "What about?" I hesitated, then decided not to hold back. "About whether this changes things too much." That got his attention. "Too much in a bad way?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "That's the problem." He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "I get that." Silence settled again. Then, "I don't want to lose what we already have," I added. That was the truth underneath everything. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, looking at the floor like he was choosing his words carefully. "Me neither," he said finally. Then he looked at me. "But I think pretending this isn't here would mess it up more." That hit, because I knew he was right. "I'm not asking for everything to change overnight," he continued. "I just don't want to go back to acting like we didn't feel it." I held his gaze. "You think we can do that?" I asked. "Figure it out without ruining it." He let out a quiet breath. "I think we can try. Not a promise. Not something perfect. Just real." And for some reason, that felt enough. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. "Okay," he repeated. And just like that, we stepped into something new. Not labeled. Not defined. But definitely not the same as before. That night, I didn't go home. Not because he asked. Not because we talked about it. I just stayed. And this time, it didn't feel like a sluchanist. It felt like a choice. Mine. But the real moment, the one that made everything feel different, came later. We were back in his room. Same as the night before. But quieter. More aware. I was lying on my back, staring at the ceiling again, when he spoke. "Gabriel." "Yeah." A pause. Then, "Can I say something without you overthinking it?" I let out a quiet breath. "That depends on what it is." He shifted slightly beside me. Closer. Not touching, but close enough that I felt it. "I meant it," he said. "About what?" "About not wanting you to leave." My chest tightened slightly. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I figured." Another pause. Then, "I don't just mean last night." That made me turn my head. "What do you mean?" He didn't look away this time. "I mean in general," he said. And just like that, everything felt real in a way it hadn't before. Not just a moment. Not just a night. Something more. Something that was starting whether we were ready or not. And the scariest part? I didn't want to stop it. It's strange how quickly something unspoken can become impossible to ignore. By the third day, nothing between us was technically different. And yet, everything was. We still joked the same way. Still sat on opposite sides of the couch. Still moved around each other in the kitchen like we always had. But now there was awareness. Constant. Unavoidable. Like every small moment carried a second meaning we both felt but didn't always address. And the worst part? I liked it. That's what made it dangerous. "Stay again." Trent didn't even look up when he said it. We were sitting on the couch, some random show playing in the background, neither of us paying attention. I glanced at him. "You're not even pretending to make that casual anymore." He smirked slightly. "Why would I?" "Because you used to." "Yeah," he said, finally turning his head toward me. "That didn't work out too well, did it?" I huffed a quiet laugh. "No," I admitted. "It didn't." There was a pause. Then I added, "You're making this harder." "Harder how?" I hesitated. Because the honest answer felt too exposed. "Harder to pretend this is still just normal," I said. His expression shifted slightly. Not surprised. Just more serious. "Do you want it to be?" he asked. That question caught me off guard. "Want what?" "Just normal," he clarified. I held his gaze. And for the first time since this started, I didn't try to soften the truth. No, I said. The word landed between us. Clear. Final. And something about that changed the air again. Trent leaned back slightly, exhaling like he'd been holding tension he didn't realize was there. Good, he said quietly. That night felt different before anything even happened. Not because of something we said, but because of what we weren't avoiding anymore. I didn't hesitate when we ended up in his room again. Didn't make a joke about the couch. Didn't suggest I should head home. I just stayed. And this time, it felt intentional from the start. We were lying there again. Same positions. Same dim light from outside. But there was no confusion anymore. No pretending this was just convenient. It was quiet for a while. Then, Gabriel, Trent said. Yeah. A pause. Short this time. Like he wasn't second-guessing himself anymore. I don't want to mess this up. My chest tightened slightly. You think we will? I think we could, he admitted. If we pretend it's nothing. Or if we rush it into something we don't understand yet. That made sense. More than I expected. So what do we do? I asked. He shifted slightly onto his side. Facing me now. We don't lie, he said. Simple. But it hit. No pretending, he added. I nodded slowly. Okay. Another pause. Then, and if something feels like too much, he continued, we say it. Not later. Not after it turns into something bigger. I let out a quiet breath. That sounds responsible. He huffed a soft laugh. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not, I said. Just didn't expect you to be the one saying it. Yeah, well, he muttered. You make me think more than I'd like. I smiled slightly. Good, I said. Silence settled again. But it wasn't empty. It was steady, grounded. And then something shifted. Not in a big way. Just a small movement. His hand brushed mine. This time, neither of us pulled away. We just stayed there, fingers barely touching, testing the space. Still okay? He asked quietly. I nodded. Yeah. He didn't move further. Didn't push it. Just let it exist. And somehow, that made it feel more real than anything else so far. I keep thinking about what you said, I admitted after a while. Which part? That you didn't want me to leave. He went quiet for a second. Yeah. I swallowed slightly. I didn't want to leave either. There. Out in the open. No taking it back. His fingers shifted slightly against mine. Not gripping. Just acknowledging. Then don't, he said. Simple. But not casual. Not this time. I turned onto my side, facing him fully now. There was barely any space left between us. And for a moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other. Really looked. Not like before. Not like friends pretending not to notice something. But like two people who had finally stopped avoiding what was right in front of them. You ever realize how obvious this probably was? I said quietly. He let out a soft breath, almost a laugh. Yeah, he said. I just didn't want to be the one to say it first. I think you've made up for that. Yeah, he admitted. Probably. Another pause. But this one felt different. Heavier. Not uncomfortable. Just significant. Like we were right at the edge of something. And both of us knew it. Gabriel, he said softly. Yeah. He hesitated. For the first time in a while. Can I? He stopped. I raised an eyebrow slightly. You've been pretty good at finishing your sentences so far. He huffed quietly. Yeah. Well, this one matters more. My pulse picked up. Then say it. He looked at me. Not uncertain. Just careful. Can I kiss you? Everything in me went still. Not because I didn't expect it, but because hearing it out loud made it real in a way nothing else had yet. And the answer came easier than I thought it would. Yeah, I said. Soft. But certain. There was a brief pause. Like he was giving me time to change my mind. I didn't. And then, he leaned in. Slow. Careful. No rush. No hesitation anymore. Just intentional. When we kissed, it wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't messy or confusing. It felt like something that had been building for a long time finally settling into place. Like something that made sense. When we pulled back, neither of us moved far. Foreheads close. Breath still uneven. You good? He asked quietly. I nodded. Yeah. A small smile tugged at his lips. Yeah, he repeated. And for the first time since all of this started, there was no doubt left. After that, nothing felt the same. Not in a dramatic, overwhelming way. Just settled. Like something that had been building quietly for months had finally found its place. And now there was no going back to how things were before. The weird part, we didn't rush anything after that. No sudden shift into something intense. No awkward panic. We just stayed there. Close. Quiet. Present. Trent was still looking at me like he was making sure I hadn't changed my mind. You sure you're okay? He asked again. I let out a soft breath, a small smile slipping through. You've asked me that like 3 times. Yeah, he said. I probably will again. Why? He hesitated. Then, honest as always now. Because I don't want to mess this up. That word again. Mess. Like this was fragile. Like it mattered enough to be careful with. It's not messed up, I said quietly. He studied my face like he was checking for hesitation. Yeah, he murmured. It doesn't feel like it. It doesn't, I agreed. And that was the truth. There was no regret sitting in my chest. No panic creeping in. Just awareness. That this was real now. The next morning hit differently. Not awkward. Not distant. Just quieter. More thoughtful. I woke up before him this time. Which almost never happened. He was still asleep. Facing me. Expression relaxed in a way I hadn't seen before. Like something in him had finally stopped holding back. I stayed there for a minute. Just looking at him. And thinking one very simple, very dangerous thought. This matters more than I expected. That realization settled deep. Not heavy. Just real. You're staring. His voice was rough with sleep. Eyes still closed. I huffed quietly. You're not even awake. Doesn't mean I don't notice, he murmured. I shook my head slightly. You're annoying. Yeah, he said, finally opening his eyes. But you stayed. There it was again. That line. Like he needed to remind himself it actually happened. I stayed, I confirmed. He didn't smile right away. Just looked at me. Then, good. We didn't talk about labels. Didn't define anything. But the shift was obvious. It showed up in small things. The way he didn't hesitate to sit closer. The way conversations lingered longer than before. The way silence felt, full instead of empty. A few days later, reality pushed in. Like it always does. We were out getting coffee when it happened. Nothing dramatic. Just a normal moment. Standing in line. Talking about something stupid. Then someone called his name. Trent. We both turned. Guy around our age, maybe a coworker or something. Confident, casual, the kind of person who clearly knew Trent in a version of his life I wasn't fully part of. Hey, Trent said easy. Natural. Didn't expect to see you here. They started talking. Work. Plans. Something about a project. I stayed quiet beside him. Not uncomfortable. Just observing. And then, this your friend? The guy asked, glancing at me. There it was. The moment. Small. Simple. But important. Trent didn't answer immediately. Just a split second. Barely noticeable. But I felt it. That old hesitation. And suddenly, everything in my chest tightened. Not because I expected something big, but because I knew what this moment meant. He had a choice. Same as me. Same as every story like this ever goes. Trent glanced at me, then back at him, and said, "This is Gabriel." A pause. Then, more clearly, "He's important to me." Not a label. Not a full explanation. But not nothing either. And somehow, that mattered more than anything else he could have said. The guy nodded, casual as ever. "Nice to meet you." "Yeah," I said. "You too." The conversation moved on. Easy. Normal. But I barely heard it. Because my focus was on Trent. On the fact that he didn't erase me. Didn't shrink me into something smaller just to keep things simple. Later, walking back, I finally said it. You hesitated. He exhaled slowly. Yeah. Why? He didn't dodge it. Didn't pretend. I'm still getting used to not doing that, he admitted. That honesty hit harder than a perfect answer would have. I noticed, I said. Did it bother you? I thought about it. About the split second of doubt. Then about what he actually did. A little, I admitted. He nodded. Yeah, that's fair. We walked in silence for a few steps. Then he added, but I didn't hide you. I looked at him. No, I said. You didn't. And that mattered. More than perfect confidence. More than instant certainty. Because it was real. That night felt heavier again. Not bad. Just deeper. We were back in his apartment, sitting closer than usual, the air thick with everything we weren't fully saying yet. You're thinking again, Trent said. I always think. Yeah, but this is the intense version. I huffed quietly, just trying to figure out where we stand. He leaned back slightly, watching me. And I think we're in between, I said. Between what? Between something easy and something real. That made him pause. Those aren't the same thing, he asked. I shook my head slightly. No, I said. Easy doesn't ask anything from you. And this does. I met his eyes. Yeah. A long silence followed. Then, good, he said. I frowned slightly. Good. I don't want easy, he admitted. That hit deeper than anything else he'd said so far. I want something that actually matters. My chest tightened, because I knew exactly what he meant. And I felt it too. Later, lying there again, closer than before, more aware than ever, I realized something. This wasn't just a moment anymore. It wasn't just a night, or a feeling we could ignore if things got complicated. This was becoming something real. And for the first time, that didn't scare me. Gabriel, Trent said quietly. Yeah. A pause. Then, I'm glad you stayed. I turned my head slightly, looking at him. Yeah, I said. Me too. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't temporary. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing, no one really talks about how something can become serious without a clear moment where it turns serious. With Trent, it was gradual, quiet, but undeniable. A week passed, then another, and somewhere in between, staying over stopped being something we even mentioned. It just was. My stuff started showing up in small ways. A toothbrush next to his. A hoodie that somehow became mine. Coffee I liked stocked in his kitchen without me asking. Nothing official, but not casual either. You basically live here now. Trent said it like a joke, leaning against the counter while I poured coffee. I glanced at him. You say that like it's a problem. It's not, he replied immediately. Too fast. Too certain. I smirked slightly. Good answer. He rolled his eyes, but there was something softer underneath it. You didn't deny it though, he added. I shrugged. Didn't feel necessary. That made him pause. Not in a bad way. Just thoughtful. Yeah, he said quietly. I guess it didn't. But not everything was easy. That would have been unrealistic. Because the more real something becomes, the more it asks from you. It showed up in small moments first. Like when he'd get quiet out of nowhere. Or when I'd catch myself overthinking something simple he said. Not because anything was wrong, but because now it mattered. The first real tension came out of nowhere. We were sitting on the couch again, same place, everything seemed to happen, and I noticed he was distracted. Not fully there. You good? I asked. Yeah, he said automatically. Too automatic. I frowned slightly. You don't sound like it. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes for a second. It's just work stuff. I didn't push. At least, not right away. But something about it stayed with me. Because a few weeks ago, he would have told me. Without thinking. Later that night, I brought it up again. You've been off today, I said. He sighed quietly. Gabriel. What? It's nothing. I shook my head slightly. It's not nothing. That made him pause. And I could see it. That hesitation again. Not the same as before, but familiar enough to notice. You don't have to shut me out, I added. I'm not, he said. You are a little. Silence. Then, I'm just trying to figure some things out, he admitted. Like what? He hesitated. And that hesitation? It hit harder now than it would have before. Because now I knew what it meant. I don't know how this fits into everything yet, he said finally. There it was. Honest. But complicated. My chest tightened slightly. This? I asked. Us. The word hung there. Heavy. Real. I leaned back slightly, processing that. Okay, I said slowly. And that's a problem? No, he said quickly. It's just new. That's not a bad thing. I didn't say it was. Then why does it sound like one? He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Because I've never done this before, Gabriel. That stopped me. Not the words. The way he said them. Not defensive. Not dismissive. Just real. I'm trying not to mess it up, he added. That again. Mess it up. Like this was something fragile. Something that could break if handled wrong. You're not messing anything up, I said quietly. You don't know that. I do, I replied. He looked at me then. Really looked. Yeah, he asked. Yeah. A pause. Then I added. You're just not used to something that actually matters. That hit. I could see it. The way his expression shifted slightly. Not offended. Just caught off guard. Careful, he said quietly. That sounds like you're saying this matters. I held his gaze. I am. That changed something. Not dramatically, but enough. The tension didn't disappear, but it became clearer. Less about uncertainty. More about adjustment. I don't want to lose what this is, he said after a while. You won't. You can't promise that. No, I admitted. But I can promise I'm not going anywhere just because it gets complicated. That was the truth. And saying it out loud made it feel more real. He nodded slowly. Then, come here. Not demanding. Not hesitant. Just natural. I moved closer. No overthinking this time. No questioning it. Just choosing it. We stayed like that for a while. Quiet. Grounded. Gabriel, he said after a few minutes. Yeah, I'm not scared of this, he admitted. I frowned slightly. Then what are you scared of? A pause. Then, that I won't do it right. That hit deeper than anything else. Because it wasn't about doubt. It was about care. You don't have to do it perfectly, I said. Then how? I smiled slightly. Just don't disappear. He let out a quiet breath. Yeah, he murmured. I can do that. And for the first time since that tension started, it felt like we were back on the same page. Not because everything was figured out, but because we were finally saying the things that mattered. Later that night, lying there again, I realized something. This wasn't just about feelings anymore. It was about choosing to stay, even when it wasn't easy, even when it raised questions, even when it meant stepping into something unknown. Hey, Trent said quietly. Yeah. A pause. Then, thanks for not making this harder than it already is. I let out a soft breath. I could say the same to you. He smiled slightly. And just like that, it felt steady again. Not perfect, but real. And honestly, that was better. There's a point where something stops feeling new and starts feeling real. Not exciting in a chaotic way. Not fragile. Just steady. That's where we ended up. It showed in the smallest things. Like how I stopped wondering if I should text him and just did. Or how he'd call my name from the other room like it was the most normal thing in the world for me to be there. No hesitation. No second guessing. You're staying tonight, right? He said it from the kitchen, not even looking at me. I was on the couch, scrolling through my phone. Wasn't planning on leaving, I replied. Good. Simple. But that word still hit every time. Weeks ago, it would have meant something uncertain. Now it just felt right. We started building routines without realizing it. Coffee together in the morning. Late-night conversations that didn't need a reason. Sitting in silence that didn't feel empty. But the real shift? It came the first time someone else noticed. We were out with a few of his friends. Nothing big. Just drinks, loud music, too many people talking over each other. I wasn't nervous. Not really. But I was aware. Of where I stood. Of where he stood. Of whether those two things matched. At some point, one of his friends, Liam, I think looked between us and smirked. You two are what exactly? There it was. Not subtle. Not avoidable. Trent didn't laugh it off. Didn't deflect. He just looked at me for half a second. Not asking for permission. Just checking. And then, we're together. That was it. No hesitation. No softer version. Just clear. And something in my chest settled instantly. Liam raised an eyebrow, then nodded like it made sense. Yeah, he said. I figured. The conversation moved on. No big reaction. No tension. Just normal. But for me, that moment stayed. Because it wasn't about what he said. It was about how easily he said it. Later, walking back, I finally brought it up. You didn't hesitate. He glanced at me. Should I have? No, I said. Just noticing. He nodded slightly. I told you, he said. I'm not doing the half version of this. That line hit deeper than anything else. Because it meant he wasn't just reacting anymore. He was choosing it. Fully. You sure? I asked. He stopped walking. Turned to face me. Yeah, he said. No pause. No doubt. Then, softer. You? I didn't hesitate either. Yeah. And just like that, there was no in-between anymore. That night felt different. Not because anything changed, but because everything finally aligned. What we felt, what we said, what we showed. We were back in his room. Same place it all started. But it didn't feel uncertain anymore. It felt complete. You remember the first night you stayed? Trent asked. I let out a quiet laugh. Hard to forget. You looked like you were overthinking every decision. I was. He smirked slightly. Yeah, I could tell. I turned my head toward him. And you looked like you were trying not to say something. I was, he admitted. We both went quiet for a second. Then I said, you could have just said it earlier. He huffed quietly. And risk you leaving? I raised an eyebrow slightly. You really thought I would? Yes, he said immediately. That caught me off guard. Why? He hesitated. Then, because you matter, he said. Simple. But it landed harder than anything else. Silence settled again. But not the heavy kind. The comfortable kind. I almost did leave, I admitted. That made him turn his head. What? That first night? I said. I thought about it. Why didn't you? I held his gaze. Because something felt different. He studied me for a second. Then nodded. Yeah, he said quietly. Same. That word again. Same. And somehow, that was always enough. Later, as everything settled into quiet again, I realized something. This didn't feel like something we stumbled into anymore. It felt like something we chose. Again and again. Gabriel, Trent said softly. Yeah. A pause. Then, I'm really glad I said it. I smiled slightly. Me too. And that was the moment it fully clicked. Not just feelings. Not just moments. Not just something undefined. This was real. And for the first time, there was nothing uncertain about it. The strange thing about reaching something real is how quiet it feels. No big moment. No dramatic shift. Just the slow realization that nothing inside you is fighting it anymore. It wasn't a specific day when I knew. Not a single moment I could point to. It was a combination of things. Small ones. Like how I stopped checking myself before saying something honest. Or how Trent didn't hesitate anymore about anything. Not about me. Not about us. You're thinking again. His voice pulled me out of it. We were sitting on the balcony this time. Late evening, city lights stretching out in front of us. I glanced at him. You always say that like it's a bad thing. It's not, he said. Just means something's on your mind. I leaned back slightly. Just realizing how different this feels now. He didn't ask what I meant. He already knew. Yeah, he said quietly. It does. There was a pause. Then I added, I'm not waiting for something to go wrong anymore. That made him look at me. Not worried. Just focused. Good, he said. Yeah, I nodded. It is. Because that had been the biggest shift. Before, there was always a part of me holding back. Waiting. Expecting things to get complicated, or unclear, or uncertain again. But now, that part was gone. Gabriel, Trent said after a moment. Yeah. A pause. Then, I meant everything I said that night. I smiled slightly. You've said that before. I know, he replied. Just saying it again. I turned my head toward him. You don't have to keep proving it. I'm not, he said. I just don't want you to forget. I studied him for a second, then shook my head slightly. I'm not going to forget the night everything changed. He smirked faintly. Good. Because I'm not letting you. We fell into silence again. Easy. Comfortable. The kind that didn't need to be filled. After a while, he spoke again. Can I ask you something? You always do. He ignored that. When did you know? I frowned slightly. Know what? That this wasn't just temporary. I thought about it. Really thought. Not right away, I admitted. Yeah. Yeah, I said. At first, it felt like something we could have messed up if we weren't careful. That's fair. But then, I paused. He waited. I continued. Then it stopped feeling fragile. That got his attention. Yeah. Yeah, I said. It started feeling steady. He nodded slowly. I felt that too. Of course you did, I said quietly. A small smile tugged at his lips. And you? I asked. When did you know? He didn't answer immediately, which meant it mattered. That first night, he said finally. I blinked. Seriously? Yeah. I frowned slightly. That early? He shrugged. I didn't know what it was yet, he clarified. But I knew it wasn't nothing. That made sense. More than I expected. I almost didn't say anything, he added. I know. You do? Yeah, I said. You hesitated. He huffed quietly. I was trying to figure out if it was worth risking everything. And he looked at me. Straight. No hesitation now. Yeah, he said. That word landed heavier than anything else. Because it wasn't just about that night. It was about everything after. Everything we chose. Everything we didn't avoid. I exhaled slowly. Good, I said. Another quiet moment passed. Then, I'm glad you didn't leave, he said. That line again. But this time, it felt different. Not uncertain. Not hopeful. Just true. I looked at him. I'm glad you said something. He smiled slightly. And for a second, it was quiet again. Then he added, You know I'm not going anywhere, right? That question was soft. But it mattered. I didn't hesitate. Yeah, I said. Yeah. Yeah. Because I did know. Not in a naive way. Not in a perfect, nothing can go wrong way. But in a real way. The kind where you've seen the hesitation, the fear, the adjustment, and still watch someone choose you anyway. That's what made it real. Later that night, lying there in the same place everything started, I thought about how easily this could have gone differently. How close we were to saying nothing, to staying silent, to letting something real pass by just because we were afraid to change what we already had. But we didn't. He said it. I stayed. And we didn't pretend after that. Gabriel, Trent said quietly into the dark. Yeah. A pause. Then, I love what this is. Simple. Honest. No overthinking. I smiled slightly in the dark. Me too. And that was it. No big speech. No dramatic ending. Just two people who almost stayed silent and didn't.